Hi, this is Marla with Mad About Cards and Crafts, bringing you another CottageCutz YouTube video tutorial featuring products from the Easter release. As promised, the Easter release was filled with tons of faith-based dies for Easter, but there were also some other beautiful dies, such as the spring bird with vine and spring potted flowers with bird that can be used year-round. I liked the spring bird with vines because it was a little bit larger than the one that came in the potted plant. I die cut it out using white cardstock, and I'm going to do a little bit of ink blending with my Pink Fresh Studio inks. I do like to add a lot of detail to an image, especially when it's on the smaller side and it is going to be the focal point of my card. So this isn't going to be a large scene, but I am going to hone in on a lot of details. So I'll start with my ink blending, and I went with a color combination that I don't use all that often, which is pinks and soft lilacs and purples. So what I started with on the largest bird was the soft lilac. I blended in on the underbelly with some bubble gum, added candied violet to the tail feather and then to the wings. I'll add a little bit more of that bubble gum, adding some more contrast to the bird. So for the wings, this is going to help add a little bit more interest, having that gradient look to it. And finally, I'm going to add a pop of color with the lavender, which is more of a purpley color, as opposed to the lilacs and the candied violet being more in the pink family. And this color combination is just beautiful, and it really is going to help bring the bird to life. Adding more detail to the bird by adding some water splatters. This is one of my favorite ways. Pink Fresh Studio inks do oxidize. Once I get the splatters on there, I want to make sure that I dry this completely because I am going to be gluing everything together, and if you have wet die cuts, then they aren't going to glue together nicely. For the beak of the bird, I'm using this Gina K Designs Sweet Corn ink. It's more of a brownish yellow. I was going back and forth between a bright yellow or a brown for the bird, and I went ahead and went with this combination because I thought, or this color, because I thought that it was a nice in-between. It is a yellow that has more of a brown undertone, and I didn't want anything to take away from the beautiful colors that I had used on the bird. For the eye, there is an embossed area for you to place that little eyeball. I used my micron pen to add some black detail, leaving a white space in the center. I do have to go back and add a little bit more of that black to the eye, but I wanted to. Once I got it on, it kind of dried back, and then I saw that there were some white spaces that I missed. Okay, so we want to add more detail to the bird. As I've mentioned already, CottageCutz dies do have beautiful embossing on them. So there are lines to follow for the feathers of the wings. I wanted to add more definition to these areas, and I am using my Copic markers. Colored pencils would be a fabulous way to add this detail. You don't have to be a great flicker or colorer to add this detail. As I have said before, the detail in the lines that are already embossed is what you're going to follow, and that just really brings the bird more to life. I'll start assembling some of the pieces. So this is the cap, and you'll see how adding that touch of purple is going to add that pop of color to that soft lilac body. I'll remove this from my mat so it doesn't get glued down to it. And we have 3 pieces that need to be attached. We have a back wing, and this one is going to just barely show from behind. I'll tuck in the added dimension of the tail feather Again, this die has lots of details for being such a little piece. And then for the top wing, I want to add more interest with foam tape. So this is going to bring a little bit more movement to the bird, adding that pop of dimension. I have a large piece of foam tape, and then I'll cut this in half and fit it underneath. And then I'll remove my release paper and we'll add that wing on. This is a giveaway video. CottageCutz, the Scrappin' Cottage, is so generous with our YouTube tutorials. I am giving away, on behalf of CottageCutz, the bird with vines, so this large bird that I am putting together right now. And in order to qualify, you must have a United States mailing address because of the cost of postage. It just isn't cost effective for us to be able to fulfill this outside of the country. Make sure that you're a subscriber, leave a comment, and like the video. Even if you aren't eligible for this die, I would absolutely love for you to ring the bell and subscribe to our channel. We have other CottageCutz designers that are over on our blog. The blog is linked in the description box below, so for more inspiration using this Easter release with spring cards, I would suggest that you head over to the blog and take a look at some of the beautiful designs that are over there. I use that same soft corn for the feet of the bird, and I'm just attaching those. And now we're going to move on to our vines. For the vines, I am using, again, Pink Fresh Studios Mint ink. Not being careful to avoid the branch because I am going to use a Copic marker to color that in. That's the easiest way for me to do it. I don't like to try to add when you have these really thin die cuts. It's much easier for me to just use a Copic marker to add that definition to the center of the branch as opposed to trying to get that ink blending. To add a little bit of pop of contrast, I'll use this key lime. And then I'll use that E44 marker that I mentioned, and that's just going to add that definition, and you'll see how it really starts popping when I add that dark brown, that shadowing to the center of the branch. I'll go over this a couple of times because I did have the ink blending in the top portion of the vine. I wanted to make sure that once the ink soaked into the paper, that I was able to get a deeper color that isn't going to dry back and get lost. And there you have it. Moving on to the flowers, there is a top layer that does have some embossing on it, so you know which one is the top and which one is the bottom layer. For that contrast, because the bird mostly has the pinks and the light lilacs, I'm going to add that darker lavender to my flower, so I'll add it darker on the underside, so the bottom layer, because there would be shadows, and then I'll be a little bit more light-handed with the top layer. And I just think that that color is just a really pretty shade of purple. So I'm going to add that water splatter to these die cuts, and then I'm going to look at how I need to assemble it, especially with the second flower right here, because the top piece is larger than the bottom piece. I used the packaging to help me assemble this because I wasn't quite sure. I didn't want that under layer to completely be lost, and so looking at the packaging really did help me with the assembly process. Again, I want to add dimension to this because it is going to be a smaller focal point on my card, and I want to add as much detail as I possibly can. So adding the pop of foam tape to this flower is going to really help it pop off the page. For my background, I did use a stencil from my stash. It's a plaid stencil, and I used the same colors that I used on my birds. So I went with the lightest color, which was that soft lilac, and then to add that little pop of color, I went ahead and added the lavender. I cut the panel down to 3 3/4 by 5 inches. I wanted a 1/2 inch reveal on my card base. So I do have a white top folding card base that's 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 inches. And I'll have a 1/4 inch of that white poking out. And I think that having the pops of white on the card is really going to just help the scene, as you can see right here, pop off the page. I added a little bit of that soft corn to the centers of my flowers before adhering them. This is a label die from my stash, and I used this 3D embossing folder from Honeybee Stamps. I thought the flower pattern in the background, again, was going to just add a little bit more interest to the card and help your eye focus in on that center scene. I am not going to use any additional foam tape on this composition, so by adding it just to the birds, it's really going to help that area pop, as you can see. I'll use some double-sided tape on the back of my plaid background, and then I'll also use some double-sided tape on the back of the embossed area. And once I get this down, I'll remove the release paper, and I'm going to center that onto my card panel. There was a giveaway in my last video. I was giving away the empty tomb, and I would like to congratulate the winner of that die. That was Lori Gordon. Lori, I will have Mary Marsh's information linked in the description box below. All you need to do is contact her, send her an email, let her know that you are the winner of the empty tomb die, and she will make sure that that gets mailed out to you. So congratulations to Lori. Now I'm going to center this on the card panel. I went back and forth in my mind as to whether I wanted to add this to the upper third of my plaid card panel, and I decided that because, again, there isn't a lot going on in this scene, that if I added it to the center of my card, it would be more of a focal point. And once I get this adhered, there's a little section you can see on the upper portion of that plaid panel that didn't quite adhere down. So I'm just going to squeeze in a little bit of that art glitter glue to glue that area down. But first I'm going to start with my vines. So I'll add the largest vine to the bottom. And I'm making sure that that tail feather of the bird is not overhanging the plaid. So I want to make sure that it stops right where that plaid panel stops. And so I'll tilt the bird with its head a little bit higher and its tail feather going more towards the bottom left-hand corner. I'm going to tuck the second vine in, and then I'll add one flower to the top vine and one flower to the bottom vine. And you can see that your eye is really moving towards that center scene, which was exactly what I wanted. To add a little bit more of the pop of purple, I did stamp my sentiment using the lavender ink from Pink Fresh Studio. I'll adhere this underneath the scene, and then that will complete my card for today. I want to thank you so much for joining me. I hope that you enjoyed this tutorial. As I mentioned before, we would love for you to subscribe and ring the bell so that you're notified whenever we do upload a new video. Until next time, I hope that you have a fabulous day. Thanks so much for watching.